How? That's such a powerful word that I've been contemplating with. I, I was trying to figure out where and why I picked it up, and it just kind of sat in my brain for years after I read Rich Dad Poor Dad, Robert Kiyosaki, and how he talked about his rich father asking that very question, how can I? And his poor father saying, I can't. I can't afford to do anything. I can't afford to do something. Right. I always wanted to know how I could afford to eat whatever I wanted at a restaurant. How can I make sure that when I go to Fleming's for the first time, that I can order everything on the appetizer menu, every fucking thing? How can I afford it? And right, man, I remember I was in university. I'd gotten kicked out of UC San Diego, and I was at Vaughn's grocery store looking up at the prices of bread and trying to figure out how can I afford to shop in this section where they have the good bread, the artisan bread, that's $4.99 a loaf. But I was looking at my phone and I only had $20 for the week. And I didn't get paid till Friday, and all I could afford was the 99-cent hamburger bread. So I had to put gas in my truck. I had to get a beer because I drank, and that was a priority. And that was all I could afford. Right? My poor mind would tell me I can't afford that artisan bread. All I could afford was this 99-cent bag. And that was being broke as fuck and not even knowing it, not even knowing how broke I was and how I was living. But I can honestly say I was pretty fucking happy then. But then as I started to progress and I started to get into a different line of work, and I thank God every day that I didn't go in the path that I always thought I was going to go. I always thought I was going to go into academia. It's when you grow up in the neighborhood that I did, you grow up in East LA, you don't think about how can I be rich. You're thinking about surviving. You're thinking about, I just want to be able to live. I just want to have an apartment. I just want to have a car that gets me from point A to point B without having to break down. I want to be able to drive a Honda Civic. Fuck, I drive a Honda Accord now because I want to, not because I have to. And so we were thinking about this concept of, switching that mindset from what can I afford to how can I afford it? As it started to develop, and years of just really training my mind and trying to leave that poor man mindset. This whole year, I've really contemplated with how can I do this? And when I was a younger loan officer, I maintained that thought, like I can't afford it. I remember my first opportunity at signing a partnership with a real estate agent, and he said, give me $500 a month so we can co-advertise. And I said, I cannot afford that. I can't afford it. I'll pay $500 for a fucking nice steak dinner now. My next shot was a $1,500 deal at one of the top real estate teams in the country. I remember going to my boss and saying, hey man, I got this fucking opportunity, but it's $1,500 a month. Fuck, I can't afford that. I'm still living in my mom's basement. I want to buy a house one day. I can't afford that, but and I didn't ask the right question. And say, how can I afford it? But I kept hunting, right? And then eventually I got to my first how. I got my first opportunity working alongside Kim Stewart Associates, Chris McCullough, some James Pitts, some great and awesome men that gave me an opportunity to join their team. And I remember meeting with them, and same thing, pay to play, co-marketing. But this time, without even knowing, I looked at my boss. I said, I remember we're driving down the 91 freeway, and I said, how can we do this? And he looked over at me. He goes, you play this right, this is going to leapfrog your career and make you a millionaire. And I'm going to teach you how. And at the time, I didn't grasp it. This almost 3 years ago, 2 years ago. And now as I start to think about the next part of what I'm going to do in my career, and I'm only thinking about how can I do this? I'm going to hire a marketing director. All I'm thinking about is how can I afford him or her? It ain't no longer I can't afford it, it's how. When I went in to break down my goals for 22, I set my target and I said, well, how do I do this? And I broke down the fucking math. I broke down the math on how I can afford to live the life that I want. The best thing this industry has ever given me, the best thing my career has ever given me, is changing the verbiage in my mind from I can't to how can I. So as you end this year of 2021 and you reflect and you start thinking about the next year and you start thinking about your future goals, come into it with one simple thought: how can I?